So I was replacing the cord on my AOYUE 2901 soldering pen because A, I'd broken it, and 2, it was a bit too short for my taste. So I figured we'd have a bit of a look at the insides of a pen while it's apart to get a sense of how this tip ring sleeve type tip system works. So the big thing about these soldering stations is that the way you swap tips is you just shove them into the socket like that with no screwing around involved. Haha. So the construction of a pen is pretty simple. You've just got this tip holder which is shoved into the handle. You've got the strainer leaf going over the cable, it's just a friction fit, and then the tip screws on in order to hold everything in place. Really nothing fancy going on at all, and then you just shove the tip in and the mechanism gets pressed into a little ridge in there in order to keep everything together. And here's a closer look at the actual tip socket. Now, you might notice that there are just 3 pins on it. You've got the blue wire going to a ground here, which is to the outermost part of the TRS connection. Then you've got the green and black parallel to the middle one, and the red and white to the end one. You might be wondering, well, where's the thermistor connector? And that's another part of the soldering station. You also notice that you've got the heater wires paralleled up, and that's because the actual heater element is what makes up the thermistor in these devices, because they are tapping the voltage drop across the heater in order to figure out the temperature of the tip, and that might seem a bit dodgy at first, but it seems to work very well, and it allows them to save on one connect, or actually 2 connectors on this. This particular station has had a bit of quality control issues with this particular device, because when I got it, the spring loading on these it was not anywhere near enough, so I constantly had tip connection issues, and that's one issue which you do run into when you're using the heater as the sensor, because you will be very strongly affected by the contact resistance of these 2 pins. If they're dirty or they're not pressing against the connector properly, they're not going to give you a very good signal, since you need to be passing a fair amount of current in order to actually see the resistance. But after I actually just took a screwdriver and pushed these in a bit to make them press a bit harder, it's worked very well for a very long time. So the actual way they've attached these wires here seems to be just soldered, I hope. If they're welded or something, I'm going to have some issues, but they do look soldered. In the other end of the cable you have a 5-pin connector. As you can see, the wires which are parallel in the other end are now split out to various pins in the connector to actually provide separate heater, feed and feedback connectors. If we strip back some of the original wire which came with the pen, it seems to be of pretty decent quality. It's a silicon rubber wire, it's reasonably flexible, not as flexible as it could be, but the outermost layer is quite thick on it. We've got the 5 wires, black, red, blue, green and white, and quite a considerable amount of very fluffy stranding to increase the softness of the wire, and it seems to be a pretty good quality wire. I would say that these are probably Teflon conductors too, because they're very slick and they slide very easily against each other. So there's nothing wrong there. The amount of copper, I'd say this is about 0.3 square millimeter, something like that. Not hugely thick, it just needs to carry a couple of amps for the heater. It has the replacement wire I got off of AliExpress, and it seems to be of very, very similar quality. Also Teflon conductors, a silicon outer shell, a bit less but a finer stranding. So I think this is going to work out quite well. Actually, when you put these wires side by side, they really look very, very similar. I'd almost say that they might be coming from the same factory, because the feel of these wires is practically identical. And here's the finished thing with its new 2-meter cord. So everything went very well doing this. The TRS connection can easily be soldered. I just used my spare iron to put it together. The strain relief was originally just a single twisty tie around here. It's got some indents for that, and I used some just lab wire for it, and it seems to be quite sturdy. Sturdy enough, at least. Little trap is to not forget to put this thing on, because I was lucky I forgot it, and on the original cord this was very, very tight, so pulling this over 2 meters of cord would just have been painful, so that's a little tidbit to keep in mind. So the pinout of this thing for future reference, my new cord has the same colours as the old one, so it makes everything easy. On this one side we've got red and white, in the middle we've got blue, and on the other side we've got black and green. And for the soldering station end we've got black, red, white, blue and green. So let's just see if this still goes together. Let's just squeeze it in there. The handle seems to be just ever so slightly thinner than the strain relief, so when you actually force the strain relief in there, it puts some pressure on the cable. And getting this strain relief all the way on has been a bit of a bother every time I've had this apart. It's never really wanted to do it properly, and I actually damaged my old wire. That's why I replaced it by just forcing this too hard, so the outer insulation snapped around there. So it was just the bare inner conductors, and that was not very good for durability. Yeah, it seems this does not want to go on fully today. Oh well, that's good enough for me. Like new. So does it all work, or have I ruined everything? No, that seems to be heating up. Yep. That's perfectly good. So now I've finally got a chance to use it in both ends of the bench. So, yeah, that's a bit of a look into the pen part of an AOYUE 2900 series soldering station. Shouldn't keep in mind the newer stations has a different revision pen, which seems to be a lot nicer than this one. I haven't taken one apart, but I can't say for certain if that's comes apart in the same way and if it's got as easily replaceable a cord. But this old model certainly has a quite easy to fix thing. So thank you for watching. Cheerio. And if you're curious as to what my spare iron might be, is this old fixed point thing. I think these are actually still a current model, and this really has served me very well for many years. And it's received a few modifications. I'm not going to be able to make it out in this light, but it's actually got a backlight mounted.